Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kendra and this is Balancedskein, my YouTube channel where I talk about all the things I make with yarn and other yarny related topics. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. It is the first of what I hope will one day become a series of videos called FO Analysis, where I talk about a finished object, right, whether it be a recent finished object or finished object from the past, and I talk about all of the details similar to what I would cover in a podcast, for example, but a little more focused and a little more granular, if you will. Today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Winterly Pullover by 2 of Wands with Hue Me Yarn. So if this is a pattern you're interested in or you want to hear my thoughts, please stay tuned to this video. But before we get into the meat of the video, I wanted to talk a little bit about my make-along. So I realized I haven't made a video since the make-along kicked off, so I figured I would use this opportunity to share all of the high-level details with you and to keep you in the loop if you want to participate yourself. So I have teamed up with Emily from High Fiber Knits to create the Safe for Work make-along. And it is a make-along, so not exclusive to knit or crochet. You can crochet, you can knit, you can weave, you can sew, as long as the project that you make is made with your hands, then you can participate in the make-along. So as far as the other rules, what you make for the make-along has to be an adult-sized garment that you made with your own hands. It has to be less than 50% complete as of October 1st, which was the official kickoff day of the make-along. And yeah, it has to be completed within the time frame of the make-along. So you have to have a finished object at the end of it to be considered for a prize in the make-along. And so the dates of the make-along are from October 1st, which is long past at this point, to March 31st, 2022. So that is a full 6 months for you to plan your project and get in on the fun of the make-along. The reason we did it for 6 months is that obviously within that 6 months we have Christmas, we have Thanksgiving, Hanukkah, all of the traditional holidays that take our time and energy away from maybe making things for ourselves. So we wanted to give that buffer after the holidays for anyone to participate who wanted to. And as far as the theme being safe for work was really inspired because I am going back to the office soon. And with this new hobby of mine, knitting garments, I wanted to make a garment that I could wear to work and show off among my colleagues. And so I decided to turn it into a make-along because I can't be the only one in that position. And so thus the Safe for Work make-along was born. There is a Discord server for the make-along. It is officially hosted on Discord, but you can also use the hashtag safeforworkMAL on Instagram if you want to share your work there and you want us to see it. Us being the rest of the participants and myself and Emily, we can definitely check in on your progress there as well. But if you want to be considered for a make-along prize, then you have to post your finished project in the finished object thread on the Discord server. That's where we will be drawing from prizes. So if you want to be considered, just make sure you do that and you'll be good. But yeah, those are all the details about the make-along. If that is something that interests you and you want to get in on the action, do join the Discord server. There have been a ton of conversations going on in there about people sharing patterns, sharing their progress on their projects. We had one sort of impromptu Zoom call that I hope we can do again at some point. So if you want to have like a little knit and Zoom and fiber session, that is definitely in the future. So if any of that sounds good to you, just check it out. No pressure. The more the merrier though, so if you want to jump in and participate, I would highly encourage it. And thanks in advance for everyone who does participate, and thank you to everyone who has participated so far. It's been a really fun journey so far. As far as the prizes, we will be gathering that as the make-along progresses. So more to come. We don't have all of the details in terms of the prizes ironed out, nor do we have the details in terms of how many winners we will be drawing. We'll kind of play it by ear depending on the participation level, but there will be prizes. I can guarantee that much at least. So with all that covered, we can get into the content of the video. So stay tuned if you want to hear about this sweater that I made in a week. So if you follow me on Instagram, you may have heard about the fact that I knit this sweater in 1 week. Now this is by no means going to be some type of tutorial or life hack video to show you how to do it. Honestly, I didn't do anything special. Let's talk about my experience making this sweater, all the specs on the design, the yarn I used, and my experience knitting it up. So if that's something that interests you, stay tuned and let's talk about it. So for starters, let me just give you a full 360 view of what this sweater looks like. So the pattern I used to create this sweater is the Winter League Pullover from Alexandra Tavel, or Two of Wands on Instagram. She partnered with Lion Brand to develop a whole new yarn line called Hue Me, and this pattern is one of the many patterns that are designed with this actual yarn, and that's the yarn I used in this project. It is an 80% acrylic, 20% wool blend yarn, and it is a category 5 bulky weight yarn. So as you can imagine, it works up pretty quick. And here's a close-up of what the texture looks like. The color I used is the colorway called Agave. So yeah, this is what the finished product looks like. So a few things about the pattern. It is a top-down seamless raglan style pattern with a crew neck and this cute detailing here at the front of the neck that's written into the design. The pattern itself is free through Two of Wands website, but you can also purchase a low-cost PDF through Lion Brand, I believe, and potentially Ravelry, but I can't exactly remember. And you heard me right at the beginning of the video. My husband is making rice. You heard me right at the beginning of this video that this only took me 1 week to complete from start to finish. In fact, I started this project on October 8th, 2021, and I finished it up on October 15th. So that is exactly 7 days of working up this project. I guess a few things contributed to why it was so fast for me. For one, this is, like I said, a bulky yarn. So anytime you're working with a bulky yarn as opposed to a worsted weight or a fingering weight or a DK weight, basically anything thinner, it is going to work up quite a lot quicker depending on what gauge you're knitting it at. And that was definitely the case for this particular sweater. I was amazed at how fast it was growing. And at a certain point, probably midway through the project, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I might actually finish this in a week. And then I took to Instagram and posted about it. And since then, I've gotten a lot of messages with questions about, wow, how did you do that so fast? And what did I think of the yarn? Because I had some reservations that I'll talk about later. And yeah, so I thought it would be fun to pop onto YouTube and make a video sort of sharing the details about the project and my experience working it up. So I had heard a lot about Two of Wands. I had been following her for a while, so I was really up to speed on her project to bring the Hue Me line of yarn with Lion Brand to life. And it was a really inspiring process to see, and from the onset I was really curious about the yarn and I definitely wanted to try it for myself. She has a ton of patterns designed with the yarn. She's recently added some new colors to the lineup, I believe. I don't know if they're available for purchase yet, but I saw her posting about that. And the hype is real. Like, people are really, really pumped about this yarn. At least they were when it first got released. And so I felt like that it was the whole idea of Hue Me was being drilled into my brain since it was first announced. So as you can probably imagine, the peer pressure, the FOMO, it built up within me, and I was like, I need to get my hands on some of this yarn. And I tend to do some project planning, so I'll plan out my next few projects, at least the bigger ones, so like garments and things of that nature, several projects in advance, so I can get my ducks in a row, sort of plan out my projects in that way. And I wanted to make the Wave of Change pullover by Denise Byron of Byron Handmade on Instagram, which is a really cute pattern. I guess I'll pop a picture of what that looks like. And I purchased this yarn with the intent of making that pattern. I purchased this yarn with some other yarn because I got a coupon from Lion Brand. And whenever I'm about to purchase yarn, I think of, okay, what projects do I plan to make? Does this yarn fit any of those projects that I have in my lineup? And this yarn was intended to be for that project. However, when I started swatching with it, I quickly realized that the gauge, the fabric it was creating just wasn't right. So the yarn that Denise designed the Wave of Change pullover with is called the Woolfolk Luft, I believe, which is also a bulky yarn. Different fiber content, different sort of construction of how the yarn is created. And so it, I would imagine, creates a much different fabric than Hue Me does, but because I figured they're both 5-weight bulky yarns, it should be interchangeable. And I learned from swatching for that project that not all bulky yarns are created equal. And when I knit up that swatch, it was very stiff, no drape whatsoever, and the gauge was just so tight. And I think the I think the Wave of Change pullover, the recommended needle size is a 6 or a 6.5 millimeter. So quite a bit smaller than the needle that is recommended for this yarn, but I figured, again, they're both bulky, it should work. And it didn't, so I had to pivot and figure out what else to do with this particular yarn. And so when I realized that it wasn't going to fit for the project that I originally intended for it, I kind of hit a wall with what to do with the yarn. And after a lot of hemming and hawing, I finally landed on making the Winter League pullover, which is what I'm wearing right now. And I don't think I gauge swatched for this specifically. I just used the recommended needle size and I cast on, and it was off to the races. So I was just like, come on, let's just get it out of the way. Part of me was just a little bit disappointed that I couldn't make the project that I originally planned to. The other part of me, as I work with the yarn, I didn't really like the way it felt, and I didn't think that I would enjoy it in a garment. So I was toying with the idea of making something completely different, but my heart of hearts wanted to make a sweater with the yarn. That's really what was in my vision from the beginning, and I didn't really want to stray too far away from that. So here we are. I was always working it up. It's kind of like, I wasn't loving it. I wasn't loving the fabric I was getting. I measured my gauge as I went, and I was meeting the recommended gauge. And I don't think it was so much to do with my gauge, but the yarn itself. It doesn't have much of any drape when you first work it up before you block or wash or anything. It is not super soft to the touch. And it's not a yarn that when I grabbed it and when I touched it while it was in the ball, it's like, oh, this is so soft, this could be a garment. Some yarns I touch and I'm like, this would make a lovely sweater, this would make a lovely shawl. But when I touched the Hue Me yarn, I was just like, I don't want to make anything with it. I don't want to use it at all. So as you can imagine, I was a little discouraged going into the project, and my mindset really from day one was, let me just use this up and move on to the next project, which is another reason that I think I worked this up so quickly, because I was eager to get it off my needles and never use the yarn again, if I'm totally honest with you. And it was really difficult for me, I guess, because as I said before, there was a lot of hype, a lot of anticipation, a lot of raving reviews about this yarn when it first came out, and I thought that I was in for a treat when I got my hands on some finally, and it just let me down. I mean, maybe the hype was too high and my expectations were a bit too high as a result of it, or maybe the yarn just isn't that good, just objectively not a very great yarn. But I'm not going to knock Lion Brand or Two of Wands. I think for what it is a perfectly suitable yarn. It just wasn't everything that I expected based on everyone's raving reviews. And so I guess to give a point of comparison, another yarn that is similar in terms of the fiber content that I like a lot more is the Lion Brand Woolies Thick and Quick. Now it's a weight 6 bulky, or no, super bulky yarn. So it's a different weight category, but the fiber content is identical, at least the last time that I checked. And that yarn, in my opinion, is way fluffier, way softer, way smoother, and just a lot more suitable for garments in my opinion. And this just didn't really live up to that in terms of the softness and how it felt in the hand and how the fabric felt as you worked it up. So I wasn't thrilled about it when I felt it in the ball for the first time. I wasn't thrilled about it as I was swatching. I wasn't thrilled about it as I was actually getting into the working up of the sweater. The only thing that gave me some excitement and anticipation was how quickly the sweater was working up. And I realized at a certain point in the project that I would be able to do this in a week or less, and that really got me pumped and excited to push forward and finish the project, if only for that fact alone. So I cast on the sweater and everything was smooth sailing. So there are some short rows at the top of the back that is incorporated into the pattern. Other than that, it is a basic top-down raglan. You can't really get much simpler than this in terms of a raglan sweater. And what is interesting to me is that the pattern instructs to do a column of purl stitches along the side. If you can see that you go back after knitting the sweater and seam it up, basically creating a faux seam. And I guess I understand why she incorporated that into the design, because if this were an actual seamed sweater, the seams would offer a lot of structure and integrity to the fabric. But because this is such a casual sweater that fits more like a sweatshirt, I didn't really see the need for that. So I didn't go back and seam up the purl column. And once I realized that's why it was there and I went to pick up and do the sleeves, I omitted the purl column entirely. So my sleeve is entirely stockinette and it doesn't have that column of purl stitches. The other element that is included in the design is this split hem detail. Mine doesn't look too neat, and it's really difficult because those stitches on either side of a split hem just tend to stretch out and distort no matter what you do. So I knew that wasn't going to be the cutest, and that's generally why I omit split hems altogether. I did it in my black cardigan, and I don't know, it just never really looks super neat and clean to me. But I decided to follow the pattern as it was written in that regard and include the split hem. And as I said before, I made the size medium. So I think because of the size I made, I don't have as much positive ease as I would have preferred in a sweater like this. So if I make it again, I'll definitely make the large, but I was confined to the amount or the number of balls of yarn that I had, and the medium required 5 balls, and that's what I had. And if I were to do the large, it would have recommended 6 balls, and I don't think I just didn't have enough yarn for it, unfortunately. And also because I was playing yarn chicken, I did modify the collar. So the collar is in the pattern a folded over collar. So you knit the ribbing as I have done here, but you knit it to twice the length, and then you fold it over and bind off on the inside of the sweater. And it creates a nice folded collar effect. Actually, my vest number 1 has a folded collar. And I really like the look of a folded collar, but I figured that since the yarn in this sweater was so thick, that the folded collar would look more like I was wearing a donut on my neck it just wasn't a cute look. And to be honest, I stalked other people's project pages. Sorry, I'll get my face back in frame. I stalked other people's projects on Ravelry, and I kind of saw that it looked like that, and I didn't want that look. I didn't think it was cute, so I decided to omit it. And good thing I did, because I wouldn't have had enough yarn to do it anyway. So that's really good. And for the bind off at the collar, I did an Italian sewn bind off, which I believe is similar to a tubular bind off. And I did that at the cuffs here, as well as on the bottom of the sweater. And I like the edge that it creates. And I'm really happy with the decision to use that bind off. And I do believe the tubular bind off in the pattern is the recommended bind off as well. So yeah, that is what I did, the modifications I made. And I mentioned it before, but if I were to make this again, I would make the size large. I would omit the split hem, omit the purl column, and I would decide to do just a flat collar with no folded over bind off as well. I would do the collar the exact same way if I were to knit this sweater again. But that's it. That's how it turned out. Hopefully I will add some B-roll footage of me wearing it and showing you the close-up details. So a little bit more about the yarn. It peeled quite a bit. At this point I had machine washed and dried it twice. And I think in the dryer a lot of the pills that were on the fabric before washing either got a little matted or came off entirely, so it's not as bad as it was before we threw it in the wash. But for it to only be at this point a couple weeks old, and at this point this is only the 5th or 6th time that I'm wearing it at all, and as you can see there's a good amount of pilling, and it seems to be concentrated in the forearm area. So when I wear this, I'm usually working at my desk and my arms are rubbing up against the surface of the desk, so that placement of the pilling makes sense to me. And I also wanted to add that this yarn softened considerably, like tremendously, after washing it and drying it So I machine washed it and machine dried it, and the fabric was totally night and day different than before I washed it. And so it went from being like cardboard to maybe damp cardboard, but in a good way. So it had a lot more drape to it. It was softer to the touch, and it's just comfortable to wear. So in terms of having a comfortable piece at the end of the day, I would recommend this yarn and this pattern. But working with it just wasn't as pleasurable as some other yarns that I've used, and that is totally subjective. I know there are people out there who love Hue Me, but I guess I'm not one of them. I like to enjoy the process of working with the yarn and not just enjoy the finished piece. And the working with this yarn and the process of creating this sweater just left a lot to be desired. It just wasn't, what's the word? Appealing to my senses. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say about this sweater. And I guess the quick bullet points to wrap it all up: would I make it again? Yes, I would. With some modifications, but I would make this pattern again, and I think the pattern is a really good one. Would I use this yarn again? Probably not. If and when I make this pattern again, I'll try it out with a different yarn entirely. Would I recommend the yarn?